Imagine this. Your mother-in-law demands you hand back the wedding ring because you can't have kids. Or you invite your mother-in-law to stay at your house because her house is being renovated and she starts rearranging your kitchen. Or worse, you're opening gifts with grandma at Christmas. One kid gets a mountain of gifts while the others get practically nothing. Yep, these are real stories that went viral recently and they hit hard. But here's the thing, boundaries can usually prevent a lot of these situations from spiraling out of control. So today, I'm gonna break down what's going on in these headlines and share how I would handle them as your boundary big sister. Hey friend, welcome back to the Mind Your Boundaries podcast. I hope your new year is starting off great. This is a new segment that I'm sure is going to quickly become one of my favorites. It's going to be where I dive into viral, jaw-dropping in-law stories from recent news, and I'm going to give you my honest big sister advice on how I would handle situations like these. I found 3 of the wildest stories that got people talking, and we are going to unpack them together. So let's get right into it. Story 1 is about a heirloom wedding ring dispute. Okay, here's the gist. A woman shared that her mother-in-law has been demanding that she give back her family heirloom wedding ring because she can't have children due to high-risk pregnancy. So the mother-in-law has said, you need to give it back because this ring was meant to be handed down to a grandchild. Now the woman and her husband, they refused to give it back, and so now the relationship has become strained. So this was posted in Reddit, and some of the comments suggested like, you should just stand your ground, keep the ring, cut off contact with your mother-in-law, she's being unreasonable. Other people say, pawn the ring, get the money, get yourself a better ring. Other people say you should keep the piece and just give the ring back and like move on. Here's my take. If you and your husband are deeply connected to this ring, it holds significant sentimental value for your marriage because it's where you started off, then keep it. But instead of stepping back, limiting contact, or, just cutting her off, this is what I suggest. Your husband should set a very firm boundary with his mom, making it clear that you're done having this conversation. Like, we will not talk about the ring anymore. He can say something like, we're not discussing the ring anymore. It was a gift, and that's the end of it. Now, if you're at a gathering and she pulls you aside and she tries to push that boundary and bring it up again, you can mind your boundary by calmly saying, Susan, we're not discussing the ring any longer. Then shift the subject. You could ask her, hey, does your drink need a refill? Step into the kitchen, excuse yourself from the conversation. If things turn hostile, you can politely excuse yourself, leave the event early, or if you're the host, you can ask her to leave. This approach keeps things respectful while reinforcing your boundary. And remember, boundaries are not about making other people change their behavior, right? That's a request. A boundary is all within your control. So if you set a boundary, it is something you can take specific action on to mind that limit, like asking her to leave, leaving the event early, whatever you have to do to protect your peace and keep yourself balanced. Looking back at this situation, it could have been completely avoided if terms around the ring would have been clearly communicated right from the start. Like they could have said, hey, we're giving you this as a very meaningful gift, but it needs to stay in the family. So if by chance you don't have kids, you choose not to, you struggle to have kids, whatever, then we will need to swap it out. That would have set clear expectations right from the start. So if you are in a similar situation, you have a heirloom ring or piece of jewelry and you want it to be passed down through generations and they just stop making babies, you could potentially lay that out there so that they know what the expectation, by accepting this gift, they know the expectation of it. I don't know. That is just how I would handle it. What do you think? Like, would you keep the ring because it is so sentimental and you started your marriage that way and said your vows with it? Or would it just like weigh you down with all the baggage and the drama? Like, what would you do? This second story is kind of funny, but I think it's relatable. A woman's mother-in-law is staying with her while her house is being renovated, and she keeps rearranging the kitchen. The issue is the kitchen is specifically set up for the couple's height difference. The wife is 6'6", the husband is 5'7". So what kept happening is the wife or the woman kept going into her kitchen, opening up the cupboard to grab something, and it's gone. And she would have to search her kitchen to try to find it, and I guess she has back problems, doesn't like to bend over or whatever, and so she would be annoyed that she would have to go to a lower cupboard to get her item. Well, the final straw happened when she was looking for a coffee mug, which, I mean, if you think about it, it's morning time, you're upset. You're just trying to get caffeine. You can smell the coffee, but you can't find your cup. Well, she finally located the cups. The mother-in-law had taken all the mugs from the mug cupboard and placed them low, like in a low cupboard. So she just lost it, and the tension was already like obviously accumulating, and she's like, you need to stay at a hotel because I can't take this anymore. Well, that turned into such a debacle. The mother-in-law was crying in the guest bedroom that night. The husband just felt so guilty making his mom, cry. So she then just was like, oh my gosh, am I the, bad guy for suggesting she go stay somewhere else? Some commenters thought the woman was overreacting, like saying things like, it's just a kitchen. Why are you making such a big deal about it? But others thought like, you should have kicked the mother-in-law out like sooner. But there were a few that suggested, why don't you do a compromise? Like just have a little space where she can keep the things that she uses every single day. Here's my take. This is your house, you can have your rules, but let's also try to keep the peace. I would recommend a more empathetic approach that communicates a compromise. It helps her feel welcome without sacrificing your comfort. I'm sure you have plenty of dishes, plenty of mugs. I would go to my mother-in-law and just say, hey, I understand this kitchen is set up not for guests. And I know it's annoying to have to get up and get on a stool every single time you need to get a mug or a plate. So what I have done is I have gathered the things that I know you use on a daily basis, and I've created a little nook or space in this cupboard for you so that it's easier for you to grab. So please, when we're doing dishes and stuff, put your stuff down here for easy access, and then stop moving everything else so I don't have to be like frustrated rummaging around when I'm trying to get my caffeine in the morning. So for this, I'm really shifting my perspective. I'm not really setting a boundary. I'm just trying to make things manageable without damaging the relationship long term. But let's say she continues to rearrange. Despite your efforts, you made her a little cupboard and she's still struggling. Maybe she just finds it really annoying that you get to have your kitchen your way and her son has to use a stool to grab everything. I don't know. But if that's the case, the tension's going to keep going, and you have every right then to say, okay, we thought this was going to be a really good idea having you stay here while your house is being renovated. This is a disaster, so we are going to ask you to make other living arrangements. I mean, I'm really hopeful that a cupboard is all it takes, like a special little nook for your mother-in-law to have her things. You guys compromise. It's A-okay. That way, you're just shifting your perspective. You're not taking such a harsh stance on this and not being so bullish. And you're really looking at it like, I'm making my mother-in-law comfortable. I mean, she is a guest. It's already uncomfortable for her. She's not in her home. She's displaced. But I'm really focusing on the bigger picture here. I want to have a relationship with my mother-in-law long term. And I don't want something like my kitchen being like rearranged for a very short period of time. I don't want something like that coming between us long term. Just my perspective. Tell me what you think in the comments. Okay, so this one hit me with all the feels. This is about a mom sharing that her mother-in-law favors the grandson over the two granddaughters. So the mother-in-law gives him more gifts during the holidays. It's really painful for the mom because she experienced like favoritism as a child. So here's the backstory. Before the family moved further away and had more kids, they had a son. And so her mother-in-law bonded a lot with him. They spent so much time together. They just lived nearby, and it was easier for them to be really attached and connected. But then they moved and they had two daughters. So that relationship never really got started with their grandma. It's not the same bond. So the mother-in-law sent a picture of the Christmas presents that she had picked out for the three kids. And the mom noticed like, oh my gosh, she has 4 for my son and 2 each for the girls. And she even made a comment like, I think I'm going to get more for Scotty. Like, I just don't think I gave him enough. So she's nervous because A, she doesn't know if it's her stuff coming up from her childhood because she experienced favoritism, or if she's just like, no, I'm just doing the right thing. I'm trying to make this equal so that my daughters are not damaged by their grandma. So some of the comments were mixed. Some people thought the mom should go no contact. They said if you can't, or if the mother-in-law can't treat all your kids equal, she doesn't get to have access to any of them. Others said you should just address this head on. Like you should just pull her aside, talk to her because maybe she doesn't even realize what she's doing. Here's what I would do. First, I would have a heart-to-heart with my mother-in-law. I would approach it with empathy and I would say something like, you have the sweetest bond with Scotty. And I know it's really special, but I need to share something with you about my childhood. I experienced favoritism in a negative way from my grandma, and it really hurt me. And I don't want my girls to feel that way about you. I don't want them to be hurt by you. Then I would acknowledge, I know why you have such a special bond with Scotty. You had all that time with them, and now we live so far away. So here are some ways that we can try to strengthen your bond with the girls. FaceTime, send them art, or when she comes and visits, set up times where they have one-on-one dates and they can really connect and bond with grandma. So I would really try to show her how we can facilitate like a healthier bonding experience so she can get attached to all three grandkids equally. And then I would set a very firm boundary. I would make it very clear that holiday gifts, they have to be equal. And if they aren't, then the exchanges aren't going to happen at all. And here is how I would mind my boundary. Let's say the next gifting season. So Christmas comes around, she sneaks up to Scotty's room, she gives him a few extra gifts because you know you're my favorite. You and your husband find out. You would let her know, okay, next Christmas when you come to visit, we're not doing any gifts, like none at all. We're just going to focus on quality time and just spending time together. So don't worry about getting gifts. Now, if she pushes back like, what? I don't get to shop for gifts with my grandkids? Then I would directly explain to her, yes, we're not going to do gifts because you broke the rule. Our boundary was everything is equal and you snuck gifts to Scotty. So I would first calmly explain to her that we're going to shift the focus to just quality time, no gifts. And if she pushes back, then I would be very direct and say, yes, we are minding this boundary because we told you fairness matters. I mean, man, I feel bad for this mom. Can you imagine how painful it would be to see your kids be treated unfairly? I mean, absolutely heartbreaking. So that is how I would approach that. Like, let me hear your thoughts. What would you do? Maybe you've even experienced it, because I've heard from so many people that experienced favoritism from their grandparents, like they were not favored, and just how that impacted them as children. It is so sad. So let's talk about it in the comments. Now, before we wrap up, I want to touch on a media story that's making waves right now. The alleged drama between Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni. According to reports, Blake set some professional boundaries that were reasonable while working on the movie set It Ends With Us with Justin. He allegedly didn't take that well. There were claims that he unleashed a smear campaign against Blake to tarnish her reputation just in case she ever spoke out about the drama on set. But then, on New Year's Eve, Justin filed a lawsuit against the New York Times, accusing them of taking things way out of context and intentionally trying to portray him in a negative light. And he presented so many receipts to prove his side of the story. So honestly, who knows who's telling the truth? Like, at this point, the lawyers are going to figure that out. But what I do know is that someone's lying, and that somebody on the other side responded to a boundary, responded to limits or something in a very immature way. Like they had a big, ridiculous reaction. And we have talked about a lot of scenarios and situations on this podcast where you almost think it's satire. Like, oh, that mother-in-law did what? The daughter-in-law did what? Like, why are people behaving so immaturely? Well, it's because you're probably dealing with an emotionally stunted individual. So that leads me to the last thing I'm so excited to share with you. I just finally finished my next new guide. It's totally free, and it's going to help you have the confidence. This is personal to me because it's something I went through myself. It is going to walk you through how to set boundaries with emotionally immature in-laws and parents, just people in general in your life where you feel like it's impossible to set a boundary with them. Like, you go to set a boundary, it's overwhelming, you get scrambled, you end up leaving, second guessing yourself, like, was it even worth it? Like, should I have even brought that up? Because then the drama, the stories they spin, the stuff they make up about you, like, they take every boundary, every reasonable little limit that you set as a personal attack, so you really question if it's even worth it. I'm here to say it is worth it, because when I started to set boundaries in my life with people in my life that were emotionally or are emotionally immature, I got my time back, I got my peace back, I got my resources back so I could focus on what really matters in my life, my family. So I created this kind of framework for myself, and I put it into this guide for you. And looks at setting boundaries in a whole new way when you're dealing with someone that is emotionally immature. So I really hope you check it out. I would love some feedback because anytime I make something, you kind of feel a little vulnerable. So if you do download it, please send us an email and just tell me what you think. Take care, and I'll see you next time.